Hello everyone, my name is Filip. Thank you for coming to this talk. It's going to be terrible, but it's okay. All right, this is Android with the side of Flutter, and this is a talk about how if you already have an Android app, which you probably should have if you're at Droidcon, how you can add a Flutter view to it, or something like that. And before I do that, though, I want to go a little bit deeper and give you a little bit of an insight on the technical underpinnings of Flutter, because it has come to my attention that not everyone knows everything there is to know about Flutter. Terrible. And I think, it will help us understand how to add Flutter to your existing app, but also, even if you don't do that ever, and if you only can take one thing from this talk, I think that would be it. Like, how is Flutter actually different from things that seem similar, like Jetpack Compose or React Native and so on and so forth, right? So like, I assume you know what Flutter is. If you don't, then wrong talk. But let's talk about the insight that led to Flutter being what it is, and exactly how that worked out. So the why of Flutter, or why it exists, is that for a long time now, when you look at apps in the App Store or the Play Store, you see something happening that makes apps look very custom designed, right? They look more like, for example, like a Netflix app will look like a Netflix app and not like an Android app, right? Case in point, these are the 5 most successful or top grossing apps. They are actually 6. So the 6 top grossing apps on the iOS store and their counterpart on the Android store. And as you can see, like if you choose any of those, like the Hulu app, they look very similar across the 2 devices. And if you look at the iOS Hulu app, you will probably say something like, oh yeah, this is a Hulu app. This is not looking like an iOS app. And on the Android side, the same thing happens. Like, you're not like, oh, this is obviously an Android app. No, it's a Hulu app that happens to be running on Android. And this has been, taking place for a long time now. And this is a trend that is obviously not going anywhere, right? Compare that to the Hello World app. Like, if you create a Hello World app for iOS and a Hello World app for Android, they will be very different. But the more successful and the more designed the apps are, the more similar they are. And if you only look at the screenshot, most people won't even realize they are looking at either Android or iOS app. The reason why I say that most people won't realize is that I actually introduced a small mistake on this slide, and nobody is screaming at me right now. Can you, now that I called it out, can you see the subtle mistake that I made on that slide? Yeah, that's right. Those are Android apps and those are iOS apps, right? And you didn't even notice. Terrible. Okay. So, but that's just the screenshots. But there's also a feel to an app, right? Like the way it scrolls and the way it how you interact with it, and the animations and the simulations, or the physics behind the scrolling and stuff like that. And so that's something that is very actually must be very to the platform. You can't just have the same scrolling physics from Android and just put them on iOS, right? And so that means that all of these apps as far as I know, they're not built in any cross-platform framework. They're actually built from scratch on each of those platforms to look very similar, but feel the way that they should, right? And so here's, if you don't know what I mean, there's an app that looks similar on both these platforms, Android on the left and iOS on the right, and the scroll behavior is subtly different. And on a GIF, you won't really notice that much, except for the overscroll, probably you can see. But like if you were using it, you would know, right? That like this feels different than what I'm expected to do, right? And yeah, so that is hard. So it's not just about the looks of it; it's also about the feel. And I lied again because this is a Flutter app. That's the other thing about Flutter. It's not that you're just like able to do very custom UI, very custom animations, but it also out of the box will give you the feel of the native platform. And this is why all the things that I'll continue talking about the technical underpinnings of Flutter, why they are there and why it is made in the way that that you see here. So let's talk about that. How does Flutter make sure that you can actually do custom design that looks exactly the same as you want it on different screens and different devices? And we're not just talking about iOS versus Android. We're talking also about Android versus Android and iOS versus, right? Like your app should look the same on a Samsung device as it does on a LG device, and so on and so forth. So it needs to have a consistent look, but it also needs to be to have the flexibility and the performance so that you can actually do things like that. Like, the overscroll here on the left or right is done by Flutter, 60 frames per second. So it needs to be fast enough and flexible enough to do that, right? Okay. So this is basically the main slide, is that any Flutter app is just, if it's only a Flutter app and not something what we'll cover next, the adding to iOS or Android, it's running basically straight on the hardware. So there's a thin iOS or Android runner that just basically, in Android land, that's an NDK app that just has the C++ bits on top of it, which is like a very slim layer of Skia and text rendering and Dart runtime. And on top of that, there's the Flutter framework, and on top of that, there's your code. And the blue and the blue parts are compiled to machine code, and the C++ things are linked to it, and that's it. So you're not. There was a talk about React Native just before me. There was no. They talk about the bridge and all that. There is no bridge here. It's really compiled to native and running straight on the metal. So compiles to machine code. I can't stress this enough. A lot of people are like, so does it compile to JavaScript or what? No, machine code. And it paints directly to the GPU, right? So, and that's why we can get the performance and the flexibility that we do. And that gives us the option or the ability to do really custom graphics, right? So here you can see this is top line from Abbey Road Studios, and they. What I want to show you here is that the waveform is obviously custom graphics, and it's 60 frames per second, but also all the other stuff that you see there, like for example the switch. This is iOS, but the switch on the right-hand side. And all the other stuff that is also rendered by Flutter. So we need to make sure that all of that is possible, right? This also means that, for example, here, developers coding or changing a variable on the left and hot reloading the app on the right, and you can see it's not just that by hot reloading we're like moving around some views, we're actually redrawing the whole thing, and in this case we're like, the function is changing, and we can change that in runtime, or in this case, in developer time, as we please. So, for example, this developer could see, oh, you know what? I will animate 60 frames per second between the different smooth values to see how that works, or to make that app look nicer, right? Then there's custom typography. That's also something that you want to have very similar on all the platforms that you have. And you also want the power of the different APIs that you might not have otherwise. All right, but the thing that I want to stress most is custom motion, right? Like apps are more and more motion heavy and animation heavy, and that motion needs to be custom. So like you can't just like crossfade everything. You have to show things, you have hero animations and stuff like that. And again, coming from the technical underpinnings of Flutter, basically every frame, if you are running an animation, Flutter is coming to you and says, so what happens now? Like where do I put all these things? How do I lay out the app? And that's 60 frames per second. So you need to be fast enough to do that. And also, you need to be fast enough to do that. This is actually almost, so it is a strength and a weakness, right? So for example, imagine an app that only has a circular indicator of like progress, and if that app it does nothing else than just like progress indicator, Flutter is actually performing worse than most other tools or Android SDK or iOS SDK or even like React Native probably, because those SDKs, if they have a circular progress indicator, you will just, it's a fire and forget, right? Like you say, hey, like I have an animation here that goes on forever and just like rotates a thing. And then that rotation is some low-level procedure that you don't care about, and it's very optimized, and it just like basically rotates stuff. Flutter is made for custom, so it will, even if you have something as simple as a circular progress indicator, at the background, the Flutter system is like every frame, it's like, so what happens now? And you are like, well, just rotate that by a couple of degrees. And oh, okay, so it will rebuild that part of the screen, and then the next frame is like, what happens now? So if your app is about like circular progress indicators, Flutter is not for you. You really you should. I feel strongly that for the success of any platform, it's very important that people understand what it's not good for, and you should use Flutter if you want something like that. If you want something pretty like based on the basic widgets of your SDK, which is completely fine. Many apps are completely fine with just doing that. Then maybe Flutter is not the best way to go. Like you'll be just using Flutter because of the hype, but not because of why it actually is helpful. And that is this. Okay, happy coincidence of all this technical stuff that I talked is that you can actually, build for all the screens, at least theoretically, right? Like, since we have this thin layer of C libraries that run anywhere, and on top of that, something that can compile to, machine code that runs basically everywhere, you can really compile your app to all the screens. And again, it's not just iOS, it's not just iOS and Android, it's not just iOS and Android and a different Android, but it can be like Raspberry Pi, we already have that. We have a web implementation of Flutter, which is very, preview. We have some desktop embedding, so you can build your app for just Mac or something like that. So all the screens, right? But it also means that theoretically you can have something like this, which is this is a Google Assistant device that is from last month, Lenovo Smart Clock, it's called, and it is a thing that has a CPU and a display, so theoretically it could run Flutter, right? And I lied again, it already does run Flutter. So like there are screens on this Google Assistant device that are written in Flutter because it's possible, because again, you have a very thin layer of Skia and other stuff, and on top of that you have something that compiles down to CPU. So yeah, this exact screen is Flutter. All right, and the second happy coincidence of all that technical stuff that I talked about is headless testing. Again, because you're kind of owning all the pixels. You can do anything with the screen. It is very much possible for you to be like, you know what, I want to test the app and not actually run it anywhere, just headlessly test it, but still do all the layout stuff, do everything, animations, everything else, right, headlessly. So in this case, for example, we're running the smoke tests for the Flutter gallery. And so these are smoke tests. This is not like a unit test. This is just actually like spinning up the application and then running it and then tapping on different things and verifying that things are actually happening. And this, you can run this concurrently, headlessly, and it will run some, 34 tests in about, 14 seconds. It would normally run, something comparable would run for minutes. Cool. So, all right. So, but to the meat of this talk, many people already have their Android apps and or iOS apps, but let's talk about Android. We're on Droidcon, and they want to add a little bit of Flutter to it, right? Oftentimes, it's something like, oh, I want to either just like one part of my application is like very designed and I want this to do in Flutter, or what we've seen more of is like we have this huge thing that we're trying to support on both iOS and Android, and we want to merge it into one Flutter app, but we don't want to build it from scratch. We want to like slowly go from there to there. And this is something, this is kind of weird because this is something that has worked for a long time. We actually have a production app, like not we, but I will be talking later about a production app that has millions of users and is using Flutter like added to an Android and iOS app since last year, but it is also not to our standards in terms of developer experience. So we're not actually talking about it that much, and this is the only kind of exception because we know people are asking for it and people are, curious. But so my message here is it's not super ready. It's in the works. I will show you the roadmap. I will show you how to track this. If you're super motivated to go this way, you can do it. And again, you could have done it a year ago. But please, like, if you can wait for, you'll see the roadmap, but like if you can wait, you probably want to wait for a better solution than what we currently have. So the app I'm going to show you that already has this is from Alibaba Group, which probably many of you know. It's the largest retailer in the world, and they have this app called Shanyu. I'm probably butchering that name, but it's something that's only available in China, I think, and has tens of millions of users, and it looks like this. Well, this is actually the parts that are in Flutter, and it is an app that is originally native on both iOS and Android, and it's slowly switching from that to a Flutter app. So they have a lot of screens that are native and a lot of screens that are Flutter. And as I said, this is the app that has been doing this for a long, long time. Also, this looks like it's like a simple CRUD app, but I want to show you. I found a video of it, so it's much more than that. It's very interactive. You can do all these things. So it's not it's not simple like that. So cool. So they did this, and there are others that do that that build Flutter into their existing apps. But again, we're not there yet. If you go to GitHub and Flutter, and you go to projects, you will find this Add to App project. That's how we call it. Add to App is both for Android and for iOS. And you will see the whole, basically, like a Trello, from all the way from concerns and ideas to done things on the right. And this is how we track the progress of this project, so you will be always updated. And you can see, like, yeah, this is blog that is in the works, and exactly who's working on which, and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, so live coding. I guess I'm gonna do that. Yes. All right. So I have a little app here called Droidcon Berlin 2019 demo, and I just wanted for this to be like a simple app that you probably you've all seen this, right? So this is like the app that gets created for you automatically if you do an Android app, and I added a second layer to it so that it's more than just one screen, and we would want to. So yeah, so that's Hello World, and this is Hello Berlin. Wow. And this is the detail view because Berlin is, yeah. And we want to add, let's start with something simpler, and that's actually where we'll end as well. We'll add a Flutter activity to all this, right? So we want to be able to, like, okay, so I go to the detail view, I click here, and I will go into Flutter, and a Flutter view that is another detail or something like that, right? And yeah, I lie in this a lot in this talk, and here I go again. This is already a Flutter view. I will just show you how I did that. But anyway, so this is Android, and this is Flutter. And the way I can prove it to you is, I can use all the colors. And this is actually, this shows how, like, in Flutter you can, because you have Skia at your disposal, you can use shaders for whatever. So in this case, we use a rainbow shader by Brian Egan. Is he here? No. He's based in Berlin. So just to do that. We can, so that you see it better, we can make this style big, right? So you see this, that it's actually a rainbow that is like that. And another reason why you like, the other thing that I did, because this is a Flutter view, is this, right? Because again, like, you're using the whole screen. It's all just pixels that you can do. Now it's going to be fun to try to stop it because I need to wait for the thing to go back because. Right. So thank you. Yeah. So again, it's on you to what you do with all that power that you have, right? And then, but obviously you don't want to recreate. Like, it is easy, but also completely pointless to recreate the look and feel of a sample app, right? So we can go further. And do things like, you probably want something like this, right? So this is using Flare, which is like a 2D animation framework that works in Flutter, and again, it's basically taking over the custom painters and just like doing that by itself. So that's awesome. And you can see here that it's, you know, this is Android, this is Flutter, this is Android, this is Flutter, this is Flutter, right? So it looks like there's navigation like you would expect on Android. It looks subtly different on iOS. Again, exactly how you would expect for it to work on Android. iOS. And the last one I want to show you is the next page, which is basically my kind of a playground of like, I'm really into sci-fi UI and stuff like this. So this is my playground for like working with glitches and stuff like this. And this is all Flutter, obviously. And the reason why I'm showing this to you is that's kind of the things that we expect you to be doing. Not this, because this is programmer art, but like, you know, that kind of custom-made stuff is what I think Flutter is for. And also, another reason is that I want to show you, like, I can make everything slower. So like you can see how it's all coming online. So this is now like I think 10x slower than normal, right? And I want you to look at the OK button, how it's like basically, it looks just like a glitch, but it's actually, it's like, there's a change in opacity on every frame, there's a change in the 3D of that, and I don't know, I like the effect, especially if it's fast enough, and I'm especially like that I'm able to do that, you know. Okay, and I can go back to Android. So how do you do something like that? So let's switch to the Android app. This is a normal Android app. Actually, let me show you. If you want to do it right now and you can't wait another second to do this, you go to flutter.flutter and you search for this, add Flutter to existing apps, and you read the disclaimer, and then you can do basically Flutter create a module, which is a module that you can add to both iOS and Android, and it will cover only Android now. And then you do some things like, for example, in build Gradle here, you have to use the compile options. Currently, you have to say basically, this is basically saying to Android that you want to use Java 8 functionality, and then you have to go, I think, here to set up bindings so that Flutter can kind of add itself to your app, and then back here. Again, please don't. You know, this may change, but it's basically a lot of changing files around. And after that, you have the ability to use Flutter View. And you can just use Flutter View. Here's Java code that is just basically saying like, hey, Flutter, create a view and add it somewhere, and that's it. So easy enough. What you will probably want to do, especially if you have something like Alibaba does with Shanyu, when you have a lot of switches between Flutter and Android, and I did this for this app as well, is that you want to warm up Flutter engine, right? So Flutter engine is the thing that will that runs your UI in the Flutter view. And by default, if you do it like this, it will basically like spin up the engine, and that could give you a lag between you show the view and between it's active. But you can do something that I did here, where in the application onCreate method, you were like, you know what, start initializing now and just sleep until I need you. And then in the main activity here, when I'm actually calling here, I'm like, you know, on-click listener, I'm launching the Flutter activity, and the Flutter activity is, is doing this, which is basically just saying, extending Flutter activity, and then saying this is the Flutter engine that you want, and it's the Flutter engine that we already spin up. So it's even if you do like in out from Flutter, it will be fine. But you don't need to do that. You can be totally like, if you have one little screen somewhere that is Flutter and the rest is not, then you can totally just say, you know what, I don't want to spin up the Flutter engine for from the start. Cool. So let me see. I think. Yeah, this is the current place where you can find that. There's going to be on flutter.dev, there's going to be better documentation once we're there. And it's also, I'm talking about the developer experience and how like the documentation is not there, but it's also about all the other things that we want to support. So, and again, this is something that already is working, and there are big production apps with millions of users that are using this thing. But you want to be able to, for example, have a, in this case, iOS app, but also Android app, and have a little, not just an activity that covers the whole screen, but like a little Flutter view inside of it. You want to be able to communicate obviously between the two, right? So like here you can see that changing stuff from one, not now, but changing here is actually changing something inside Flutter and vice versa. And you want to be able to have multiple Flutter views in one place, in one screen, and so on and so forth. And this is, you know, the main meat of what we're trying to support. Again, this is the project that you wanna follow if you're interested in this. And in summary, okay, so I told you about like the technical underpinnings of basically you own all the pixels. We basically compile to native. There's no bridge, which means it's both a strength and a weakness. It means that if you, for example, have an Android view, you can put it into a Flutter view, but it's basically you have to render it and then like put it into your Flutter stuff and show it there. So you know, there are limitations that this creates, but again, it's also a strength because you now can do whatever you want with that. That's one thing. The second one, Edge to App is possible and has been possible for a long time now, but it's not baked yet, and it needs some time for it to be at the level that we would expect for a feature in Flutter. And it's been used for some time, but maybe it's, you know, unless you're super motivated like Alibaba is to do this right now, you should wait. And yeah, so I'm here for the rest of the Droidcon, as well as many other Flutter people and community people that use Flutter are. We're at the booth, so if you want to ask questions, you're very welcome to. And yeah, thank you.